Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of your favorite sports podcast, Garbage Time Takes. I'm Derek, here with only a singular co host today, Bobby Epler, live from the couch, live from the iPhone camera. Bob, how are we tonight?
Oh, we're doing great. My condolences already to Dennis Weaver, who was not in attendance and will be promptly and immediately getting shredded on this podcast. Dennis, you're just not. Dennis isn't even providing excuses anymore as to why he's missing pods. It's getting desperate when he's just saying, "I can't make it." No reason, no
Correct.
wherewithal. I mean, heck, could have just not felt like it for all we know. No reasons.
Bob, that's absolutely correct. We've it seems like we've been trying to work around Dennis's absences a lot lately. Just hasn't worked out, but the common denominator typically seems to be uh, Dennis unavailable for Thursday night podcasting. Bob, just sickening.
I mean, Dennis or Derek, I called in. I didn't have my camera on, but darn it, I made it in when things looked bleak.
You
And
did.
Dennis Weaver, no show, no call, no show, as they say.
Correct. I mean, Bob, you were an absolute warrior, having to get up at 5 a.m. the next morning, just absolutely grinding, and Dennis just can't be bothered to show. Can't be bothered to show, Bob.
We shall overcome, Derek. The
You
show
know,
must go on.
you know who else couldn't bother to show, Bob? The
Who?
Philadelphia Phillies at the bank. Just an absolute refusal to show, a complete disappearing act from some of the most important players in the Phillies lineup. Bryce Harper, not clutch. Trey Turner, certified not clutch. Nick Castellanos, 0 for his last 21 to end the series, Bob. They said they couldn't walk into the bank and win. They said you're down 3-2, curtains. Mad Dog Russo, Bob, was threatening
Threatening
retirement.
retirement. Threatening
Threatening
retirement.
retirement. Well, I mean, he claimed he would retire, but everyone with half a brain cell knew he wasn't going to actually retire. But threatened retirement if the Arizona Diamondbacks were to walk in and win not one, but two games in the bank, down 3-2. They said it was impenetrable, Bob. They said it was impenetrable. A steel vault enclosed the safety of the bank. Bob, the snakes are alive. The snakes are alive.
Derek, I think they said similar things about the Titanic and what happened. It went down with the ship, and sure enough, so did the Phillies. Derek, the snakes, the young core that the snakes have, just cannot be. Their spirit cannot be defeated. I mean, Brandon Fat, Derek, out there shoving
Dealing. I mean, dude had a near 10 ERA throughout the course of the regular season. Was
the worst
handled pretty.
postseason start, one of the worst postseason ERAs of all time after the first start, I believe.
Yeah,
And since then, has turned it around and provided a legitimate third option
correct.
for for this Diamondbacks rotation that is truly pivotal in them being able to knock off the Phillies. Um, you know, Corbin Carroll absolutely bona fide, legit, showing up in big moments.
Correct.
Just unlikely, some of the unlikely names in the bottom of the lineup for the Diamondbacks coming
Geraldo
in big,
Perdomo, Bob. Geraldo Perdomo.
coming in big. Tommy Pham launching nukes.
Correct.
I mean, discarded by the Padres,
Correct.
discarded by the Mets, and
Correct.
sure enough, for the Snakes, here he is launching nukes.
I mean,
I
Bob,
mean,
what about Ketel Marte, franchise or not just the franchise record for consecutive hits in postseason games, the National League record for consecutive games with the hit. He's at like what? 15? 15 games or something ridiculous like that with a hit. Dude just
this
does not
Ketel
stop
Marte we're talking about. Ketel Marte. I
correct.
mean, give me a break. Really, I mean, the bend but not break approach from the bullpen. I mean, we got Jake Manaply out there looking like he's gonna
Garbage.
looking like he's gonna blow it every time, but
I
there's
mean,
just nobody else.
you've got Manaply, you've got Saul Frank, two lefties whose sole job is to get lefty outs, and all they did was walk every single lefty they faced. Until Saul Frank got that pop out on a middle meatball to Bryce Harper, bailed. Uh,
It looked like it was going yard.
it
Looked
looked
like
like
it
it
was
was
going.
going yard. Warning track power, nearly. But Bob, what about the pride of Arizona's own Kevin Ginkel, Bob? Absolute shutdown man of the eighth inning, came in to bail out. I don't remember if he bailed out Saul Frank or Manaply in the seventh inning, but bailed him out. 7 pitches, came back in the eighth, shut it down, and handed it over to none other than Paul Sewald, Bob. Fantasy baseball legend Paul Sewald.
Discovered by yours truly. I can't help but be a little bit proud of Paulie. Fresh out of Seattle,
Correct.
mowing down the opposition at record pace. Kyle Schwarber, where were you? See you later.
Trey Turner.
See you later.
Bryce Harper.
Bryce Harper, see you later. Nick Castellanos, former Red. Do we even need to say more? See you later. Once a Red, always a Red.
Correct.
Losing into.
Bob, speaking of
I did say this. I will say this. I did get a chance to talk to Dennis. Like I said, we have no idea why he's gone. Probably just retired from the podcast and didn't tell us. However, he did say, in response to the Snakes winning it all, besides being on the verge of tears, he did say that this could have been the Cincinnati Reds. This could have been the Cincinnati Reds. The records were nearly identical. Derek, you're probably thinking the same thing about the Chicago Cubs.
To a degree.
This could have been them. Everything kind of seemed to fall right into place, and it lined up for a very enthralling World Series matchup. Truly one of the matchups that I was rooting for the most, I would say, from the jump. Okay. So very, very excited. I think that this has the potential to be, I just really can't see either team at this point yielding ground. They both were kind of Cinderella stories to an extent that just kind of came perfectly together. The Texas Rangers were obviously a little bit more heavily vaunted, but they haven't done anything. They were bums 2 years ago.
They had to win 4 games in Houston, Bob. 4 games in Houston.
Correct. Nobody thought it was possible. Both teams have shown that they could go on the road against all odds and get it done. It just feels like even no matter what happens in the series, it's going to be hard to rule anyone out.
Yeah.
Given that what has happened. And obviously you've got the Rangers playing for their first World Series championship ever in history. And it obviously Arizona, it's been some time as well.
2001.
So, fresh blood. The dynasties are over. It's time for a new era, Derek.
Correct. A couple things, Bob. One, I'd love to see the Dbacks bring back this color scheme for the World Series. They probably won't, but I'd love to see the purple, teal, and gold make a comeback. That's number one. Number two, Bob. Former Reds legend Jeff Hoffman absolutely blowing it at every turn. At every turn, Bob, Jeff Hoffman was a disaster. And then, last but not least, Cubs legend, double agent Craig Kimbrell, folding in Game 2, folding in Game 3, folding in Game 3 and Game 4. Just
Dirty Craig.
You got the full Craig Kimbrell experience in this NLCS.
Couple walked batters.
Couple walks, couple yabos, couple big strikeouts. You really do get the true Craig Kimbrell experience. When it comes to the playoff times in the clutch. And then lastly, Bob, just to bring it all the way back around, I have a few memories that remain from the adolescent years of watching playoff baseball. One of those being the Texas Rangers and the St. Louis Cardinals in the World Series. Texas Rangers, literally, Bob, a single out away from a World Series, up 3-2 in Busch Stadium. And what happens? David Freese hits a moonshot to right field, ties the game. The Cardinals win it in extras, and Joe Buck's rendition of "We Will See You Tomorrow Night." That was that series, Bob. That was that series. It will stick in my mind forever. Nelson Cruz going back to the track to the wall and the ball going over his head. And then the other Texas Rangers memory I have is their series with the Blue Jays. I believe it was a wild card series. I don't remember for sure. But I believe the famous Jose Bautista bat flip is from the playoff series against the Texas Rangers. Um, yeah, so fortunately for me, I have a soft spot for both the Texas Rangers and the Arizona Diamondbacks. I'll be rooting for the D-backs as a current Arizona native, or resident, excuse me, Michigan native, Arizona resident. Uh, and we're gonna ride the snakes, baby. We're gonna ride the snakes. We're gonna ride the D-backs. Embrace the chaos, Bob. Embrace the chaos, so that I can head up to Phoenix to go to the World Series parade whenever that is, because that would be electric.
Not too often that you get a chance to go to one of those.
Correct. Correct. And for those of you who are curious, you're saying, Derek, you're such a big Diamondbacks fan. Why don't you go to the World Series? If any one of you out there would like to donate $626, I'll make my way over to Chase Field, the real bank, for a World Series game. But until that point, the D-backs are not my number one team, so in all likelihood, unless free tickets fall out of the sky and land in my hands, will not be going to the World Series, but we'll definitely be rooting for it. Bob, one last thing on the Phillies. How much of those games do you think Dennis actually watched? Was Dennis fraud watching the Phils? Was he box score watching the Phils?
Yes, Derek. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. Not enough live reaction from Dennis to even anywhere
Correct.
close to warrant
Bob, you had
a
more live
acknowledgement.
reactions than Dennis did.
And I have no skin in the game.
Correct. Correct. And
No
and
skin in the game.
and now in the World Series, you get to watch two of your most productive players, Adolis Garcia and Corbin Carroll, go at it. And Max
I
Scherzer,
mean,
Mad Max, Bob,
I mean,
Tigers
my
legend,
my, my fantasy team's looking better by the second.
Tigers legend, Mad Max could be getting a World Series ring. Um,
Rig me, baby.
Trying to think if there are any former Cubs on either of the two teams, but not that I can think of. A lot of former Cubs in Philadelphia, which would have watched, which would have made seeing them go on a World Series run very painful. Um, but yeah, I think the ties are limited purely to my, current location of residence, and we're embracing the chaos all the way, Bob. Mad Dog Russo, you're a coward. Retire. Moving on, Bob, we're going to talk about another one of Dennis's favorite teams, the Cincinnati Bengals, just briefly. And the reason I want to do this, Bob, is because I had grandiose plans to ask Dennis what his thoughts were going into the matchup with the 49ers, considering Brock Purdy is hurt and they've come off an ugly loss to Minnesota. And it was only a short time ago that Dennis had completely punted on the season, and I was trying to walk him back from the brink. And what do you know? The Bengals' luck is breaking. They're a 500 team, and they very well could go 4-3 this weekend. Bob, do you see the Bengals pulling this one out?
Yeah, I do actually.
And before you continue, does Dennis deserve to get any enjoyment out of it after punting on the
No,
season?
No,
I'd agree.
but he will.
Absolutely not.
But he will. And he said that they're dead in the water. I don't know if he
He
quite
was
used the
embracing the tank,
season is
Bob.
over, but he might
Bob,
have.
he was looking forward to tanking. He said, and I quote, when I said, Dennis, you have to beat the Cardinals. They're actively tanking. And if I remember correctly, he said, well, at this rate, so are the Bengals. So I think it's fair to say Dennis had legitimately given up on the season literally 4 weeks in.
Yeah, and Dennis is usually the one to preach optimism, given the history of the Bengals starting slow,
Correct.
folding that quickly. Ever since this team signed Joe Burrow to a new contract, Dennis has written them off and said that they were dead in the water.
Correct.
We'll still see, I guess. Maybe if they lose to whoever the backup is for San Francisco this week, he'll really be dead in the water. Um,
Sam
yeah, but
Darnold, Bob. It's going to be the Sam show.
oh my gosh. Well, that would be true embarrassment. I actually was thinking about I actually picked the Bengals this week
As did
in the
I.
pick um before I even knew that Brock Purdy was questionable. Um so knowing that I'm obviously very secured in that pick. Um can't say that I'm necessarily like over the moon about that, given that I too also predicted that the Bengals season was heading for a nosedive.
Bob,
But
I was the only one that I was the only one that seemed to have any faith in that the Bengals would turn the season around. I've picked them every week. Literally, I said if they lose to Arizona, they're on the ban list. And what did I do? I picked them to beat Arizona, they won. Picked them to beat Seattle, they won. And I said they're darn sure beating this San Francisco 49ers team to go 4-3 because if you're Bob, they can't possibly let PJ Walker and the Cleveland Browns. Bob, PJ Walker, no Nick Chubb, Deshaun Watson either concussed every week or can't throw every week, getting too many massages and not enough practice. And there was just no way that the Bengals were going to lose to the 49ers. And now that Brock Purdy is almost certainly going to be out, there's no question. No question. Um, so yeah, just
I'm with you.
it would sure be great to get Dennis's thoughts on this. I'm sure he'd say I knew all along that we were gonna rise up from the ashes, take control of our destiny, um, yada 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 bull jive after nearly throwing his Bengals jerseys in the trash after Joe Burrow got his record contract extension. Um, but alas, he's not here, so we get to roast him and he can't even defend himself. So thank you, Dennis. Bob, next on the list, the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions, Bob, good teams have bad games. And when it matters most, you want your peak football to be in December, January, and February. The Baltimore Ravens were the better team that day. They proposed a significant, matchup nightmare with a mobile quarterback and multiple defensive starters on the pine. Will Harris forced to be CB2, Bob. Absolute, the human turnstile Will Harris. Disaster. And unfortunately for the Lions, the defense put him behind the 8 ball early, and a couple quick 3-and-outs from the offense, and the game was basically over before it started. But here's the thing, Bob. Here's the thing. It was almost one of those games where it wasn't even really like the Baltimore Ravens played exceptional. On defense, they did. But offensively, it just felt like Lamar had all the time in the world and he just threw it to whoever was wide open. It wasn't like we were getting beat in man coverage all that often. Uh, Not like Lamar was making turkey hole throws, tight window throws. It just seemed like every play they had a guy wide open. And for me personally, Greg Olson made a point to point it out on the broadcast. I was thinking it to myself and was glad it was validated. The Lions just refused to pass rush aggressively. And we saw this earlier in the year, Bob. In week 1 and week 2, they were pretty much held sackless, if I remember, through the first 2 weeks. Maybe they had one in there, but they were basically sackless through the first 2 weeks. Then they got to play Desmond Ridder, Baker Mayfield, Bryce Young. Who am I missing? Jordan Love. Yeah, those four quarterbacks, and the pass rush came alive. Do you know what those four quarterbacks, Bob, have in common with Geno Smith, Patrick Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson? Virtually nothing. Virtually nothing. The other three quarterbacks are mobile quarterbacks. And for whatever reason, Aaron Glenn decides that we're going to play contain pass rush and leave our secondary out to dry for 8 seconds plus. And it didn't work. Dan Campbell said there was lack of execution by the players. I'm sure it was a little bit of both, but I'm sure you were just as frustrated as me, Bob, watching. It wasn't like they were getting beat in the pass rush. It just seemed like the Lions were refusing to rush up the field to try and aggressively take down Lamar. They were okay with just sort of gradually closing the pocket on hoping the defensive secondary would bail him out, and they never did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just something that I've come to expect from Aaron Glenn Aaron Glenn led defenses is that, under the leadership of Aaron Glenn, things have been very inconsistent. Um, sometimes we'll get games like this where it's stinker city. We just get shellacked. I mean, last year against Carolina, we went out there, didn't look like we had any sort of game plan,
Correct.
didn't know what we know what we were doing. And when it gets bad, it gets really bad. I mean, just sieve. I mean, there was absolutely nothing we could do. I mean, we had, like you said, 1 3 and out immediately on offense. The Ravens get the ball, march right down the field, score. We have a 3 and out, no chance to respond. 14-0, just like that. I mean, when you start out 14-0 in 2 drives, it's going to be tough. Even from that point to bring it back. So the and in addition, you made the point about the pass rush. Aaron, I feel like there's, for whatever reason, I feel like we are always very, very. I don't know if it's a. I don't necessarily know if it's a talent issue or a scheming issue. I'm not a qualified enough football eye, maybe, I guess, to comment on this. But for whatever reason, we seem to struggle heavily. I mean, against better teams for sure, but in general, I would say to generate a consistent pass rush. I mean, obviously we have Aiden Hutchinson, but it kind of feels like at times it's Aiden Hutchinson or bust in the pass rush. How I've commented on our interior defensive line in the past, so I won't go back into that. But obviously our secondary's been banged up. There's been known injuries there, and we're relying on Will Harris, who, God bless him, should be, in the XFL. This is, I mean, how we keep putting this guy out there, how there are no alternatives, I have no idea. And, Aaron Glenn, I'll, we've been okay. We've been decent so far this season, like you said, against sub, maybe some substandard quarterbacks or average to below average quarterbacks. But whenever we've played a mobile quarterback, this has been a very, very, very consistent theme with this team. And which is why I said at the beginning of the week um, that I was very concerned about this game, just because of the mobile quarterback. Um, Obviously, I didn't think Lamar was going to have the passing day that he did, but he just went ahead and did it anyway. Um, and when that happens, It takes the entire momentum out of the team, and obviously the offense has got to try to be a saving grace more than they were. But when you start out behind the eight ball so much, and you're kind of pigeonholed into a certain set of play calling to bring you back from that, um, it's going to be a tough day at the office. I mean, individually, some of our better offensive players had fine days.
As
Um, you know,
really in the second half,
Amon
as
Ross St. Brown had a good day. Jameer Gibbs, in one of his first starts, had a relatively good day, like fantasy football wise. If you're just playing fantasy football, but everything else just kind of went south. And I think it's just a matter of resetting. How can we? The thing that we needed to address moving forward is how we not be stagnant. Now this has become to the point where this has kind of become a trend. We need to try something different moving forward, whether it's whatever it may be. That's above my pay grade to comment on. But this is exactly why I was calling for Aaron Glen's head not too long ago, is because the the inconsistency is bad, and there's a lot of times where even when we're winning, um, where the scheme is just poor. We're playing soft coverage in long yardage situations where we're essentially giving them free yardage, free first downs. And like I said, I know there's some weaknesses in some areas that you can't blame Aaron Glenn for, but this is it's kind of just irritating at this point. Every time we go against a mobile quarterback, it's the same song and dance, Derek.
yeah, I mean, gave up 31 offensive points to Geno Smith, gave up 38 offensive points to Lamar Jackson. Going back even to 2 weeks ago, the game against Tampa Bay, they won 20-6. But if Isaiah Buggs doesn't get his hand up, Mike Evans would have ran untouched for like an 85-yard touchdown on a simple play action over the top pass. I hate to bring it up, but Kansas City, very fortunate with the number of dropped passes that were relatively, you know, easy catches. They weren't really that contested.
Yep.
And, it just feels like against bad teams and bad quarterbacks, you can get away with some of the uh,
Subpar
subpar
scheming.
performances in the secondary. You can't get away with that against the Baltimore Ravens, and it showed in a drastic way. And we'll see. I'm with you, Bob. I was hoping Aaron Glenn would have been relieved of his duties going into this offseason. Even last year, when I felt like I said it every week last year in the second half, even during the winning streak, I made it a point to point out, even in our wins, how many times the other team was forced to punt, and it wasn't very often. Um,
Nope.
yeah, it's sort of like a bend don't break defense, but the bending is entirely dependent on whether the offense catches wide open passes or hits wide open receivers. Because Baker Mayfield missed a number of deep shots last week that could have changed the point of the game at any time. Um, and yeah, it's a concern. Um, but honestly, the Lions scheduled the second half of the season, it'd be very difficult for them not to win the division. And you're going to get a nice little matchup here with the Raiders with a non mobile quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo. A Raiders team that, couldn't, struggled mightily with Green Bay, got blown out by the Patriots, and outside of Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, really have almost nothing. Lost to the Saints, too. Um, you know, the, or did I don't even remember if they played the Saints. I was thinking Foster Moreau was still with the Raiders, but now he's in New Orleans
I'm
and
pretty
they
sure
lost
they
to
did play
Jacksonville.
the Saints
I'm pretty sure they
because I
played
think
this.
that Aiden
Oh, Aiden O'Connell.
was in for that game.
I want to say you're right and I'm
That
right.
might have been the game that he actually got hurt in. I'm not sure, Derek.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I know Jimmy G left the Patriots game with a back injury. Not that it mattered because they got absolutely wiped anyway. But this is a get right game. There are very few get right games in the NFL, Bob. Um, the margin of error is so thin with how talented every single individual player is, save Will Harris. Um, but this is a get right game because schematically you match up really well. Offensively, you should be able to do almost whatever you want, and you're playing at home. Um, and so, yeah, I feel really good about this week. There's no, the hope is not lost in any way, shape, or form. The Baltimore Ravens are a good team, and there's no shame in losing to a good team. And the 38-6 score isn't really indicative of what the Lions offense did in the second half. They had a lot of drives that went pretty deep into territory, but the context of the game sort of, you know, pushed them to have to continually go for it on fourth down to get touchdowns, and ultimately they just weren't able to score enough touchdowns. So the 6 points isn't really indicative of how well the team was able to move the ball in the second half, especially. Um, so ultimately, I'm not really concerned about the offensive performance. Ben Johnson will get it right. Really, um, you know, it was hard to even gauge how much David Montgomery's absence was felt, considering they just went three and out like three straight times to start. And yeah, it was it was a throw out the tape game, Bob. It was a throw out the tape, and even the past three, either the past three or past three of four Super Bowl champions all had a blowout loss at some point early in the season. I remember the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game against the Saints specifically when they lost like 31-3 in New Orleans. The Tom Brady led Buccaneers, the championship Buccaneers, were absolutely blown out on the road in New Orleans. I'm pretty sure the Rams suffered a blowout loss at some point on their road to the Super Bowl. Blowout losses happen, and they happen to good teams. It's just a matter of bouncing back and, you know, getting recentered a little bit. Everyone do your job, yada, yada, yada. No more needs to be said. But we get a stress free Sunday into an exciting Monday when the Lions, at home, Bob, at home, Ford Field, going to be rocking for the first Monday night in a long time. Very much looking forward to it. Any score predictions, Bob? Are we going to run Las Vegas out of the gym?
24-17 Lions.
Ooh, close one. I'm going to go with 38-13 Lions. I think the offense, I think it's going to be a fun game for Lions fans. Very similar to the Packers game, is sort of the feeling I get for how this one is going to turn out, except the Lions won't even give the Raiders a glimpse of hope in the second half to come back on. Bob, any other NFL games this weekend that sort of tickle your peach?
Nothing off the top of my head. Let me just pull up the slate here,
Yeah, that's what I'm doing as well.
if you don't mind.
The Buccaneers did have a bounce back victory over the Bills. Uh, or the Bills had a bounce back victory over the Bucks 24-18. Just as a reminder, the Lions beat the Bucks 20-6, so better team than the Bills. Hard to argue, Bob. The
Were
transfer
basically last year too. So,
correct.
um, I mean, Derek, you gotta love it. Interdivisional matchup this week: Vikings Packs. That'll be very interesting to see what happens there. Outside of that, I mean, I'm a little bit intrigued by the Browns Seahawks
As am
just
I.
because it's two good teams, and I'm a touch intrigued by Patriots Dolphins just because I expected the Patriots to be dead, and they weren't dead last week. So, obviously it's the Dolphins.
Bob,
You got
any
you
intrigue
got
any intrigue from the Jags Steelers, Bob?
no, because it'll just be typical Mike Tomlin. He'll probably win, and then they'll like lose the rest of the season, and they'll be 500. I'm I I'm so sick of this, Derek.
So am I,
How are the
Bob.
4-2?
It's disgusting. It's
Four
truly
and
disgusting.
two.
Truly disgusting, Bob. I don't know how to explain it.
I mean, they beat the Ravens, Derek. They beat the Ravens 17-10.
They did, Bob. They did just that.
They beat the Browns. They beat the 2-0 in the division, Derek.
3-0, Bob. Or I could have sworn they beat the Bengals too, but no, the Bengals lost to the Browns because they always lose to the Browns. But yes, and that game against the Browns was disgusting because they scored like 7 offensive points, not off of turnovers. I'm pretty sure T.J. Watt had like a fumble 6. The Browns should have won that game, and the Steelers' defense bailed them out. It's disgusting, Bob. Could not agree more. Bob, last weekend there was a massacre. There's a massacre on Saturday night in East Landfill. I told you it was coming. I told you it was coming. I didn't want it to happen, Bob. Believe me. I told you. When in the message I said, Bob, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the Wolverines are gonna roll on Saturday, and they did, Bob. They did. Harlan Barnett's clapping was not enough. There was not enough chopping, and I mean, Bob, what you needed that one for a shot at bowl eligibility. It feels like you needed that one. That was the one game where MSU teams of the past would rise from the ashes. Mark D'Antonio would give some sort of goofy speech about how no one believes in them, and Michigan this, Michigan that, pride comes before the fall, all that garbage, and MSU would have rose up and at least thrown a single punch, Bob. They would have at least thrown a punch. And there were no punches thrown. Bob, do you have any thoughts on the Michigan State Spartans' performance? Uh, and is it time to go back to Noah Kim?
No, absolutely not. No, it is not. Heck no. No way. Um,
Kim Sanity, Bob. What about Kim Sanity?
oh my gosh,
Those
dude.
first 2 weeks of the season against CMU and the Richmond Spiders was so great.
I mean, it was. It was so great until it wasn't, Derek. It was so great until it wasn't. Um, we need to. Why are we? We need to start scheduling like Washington, and schedule some more bums. I mean, come on. What are we doing here? Harlan Barnett, Dwayne Casey 2.0.
Correct.
Get him out of here. I mean, Derek, I don't know what you want me to say. This is just a mismatch of epic proportions. This is just disaster area. This is we have no chance. We're out talented. We're outclassed. We're out scouted. We're out, outsigned. Whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's just from the jump. You know, we're battling, trustees getting canned. We're battling,
That was wild. I read that statement. Seems like someone has a vendetta out for your board of directors. That was crazy.
We got trustees or whatever. We got, coaches that have got Title IX cases. We've got Harlan Barnett who sucks. We've got
The
everything going
worst
wrong.
special teams coordinator in America.
We can't get anything right now. Derek, I mean, the only thing that's keeping me halfway off life support with this team is the chance that we could somehow reel in Urban Meyer. You know,
No,
somehow
Bob. No.
Derek, Derek
Bob, I can't.
it's somehow not dead yet, Derek. The rumor is somehow not dead. There's still a chance. I was seeing this week people reporting that we've got a 60% chance of landing Urban Meyer. Derek, would that just be disgusting? This is the only Derek, it's the only thing I have to talk about with this team. I don't know what you want me to say. This is a train wreck. We're not making a bowl game. We're gonna get rolled at Ford Field by Penn State so badly. Matt Rule, who I can't stand, is gonna roll me.
I think so.
I am just sick, Derek. I'm sick.
Bob, here's what it all comes down to. I think here's what it all comes down to.
Oh my gosh, Derek.
There was a failure to put the kids first.
Yes.
Mel
Thank you, Jana.
Tucker put himself first, his desires first, his his horniness first, Bob. He put it first. He was not thinking he was not thinking about the kids on his team. He was thinking about the kids in his sack. And he let the kids down. He let the kids down, Bob. And John L. Smith would have never let this happen.
He wouldn't have. He would have said, I mean, this is just a darn coaching mistake, is what he would have said. He would
Correct.
have said it was the coaches.
Correct. But yeah, I mean, coming off of the disaster against Rutgers the week before, Bob, I mean,
Oh
Greg
my god.
Schiano just
We
giant.
had him until we didn't,
You
Derek.
had him until you didn't. Uh, and then he had, I hate to bring it up, but the classic Spartan cheap shot. The classic Spartan cheap shot where your offensive lineman torpedoes Rob Gronkowski style into our defensive end's head, gets himself suspended for the first half of this game. Bob, just disaster all around, but two words will save you. And I'm not talking Urban Meyer. I'm talking basketball season. Basketball season is right around the corner, Bob. Your exhibition game, you had Steven Izzo sinking free throws, you had Cohen Carr flying around.
We did.
It's almost
We
done.
did.
But I'll say one thing on Urban Meyer, Bob, and you feel
Derek, this it's not dead yet. It's not
feel
dead.
feel free to have some discourse with me on this.
It's not dead.
How successful would Urban Meyer actually be in today's day and age? Because you can't get away with paying players under the table anymore. The playing field is leveled in terms of NIL. The playing field is leveled. Urban Meyer couldn't even go a full season without striking his kicker with his foot. How is Urban Meyer going to be able to handle a bunch of entitled adolescents who are wanting to get the bag and will transfer at the first sign of hardship, Bob? I just don't know how Urban could, deal with today's age of recruiting. He's got a nice, cushy job with Fox that allows him to travel the country and stick his fingers wherever he pleases without his wife knowing, and talk about football and not have to worry about the day-to-day stress of, putting together a football team. So I'll never say never. There's not a 0% possibility of Urban Meyer coming to MSU. Um, but I do find it highly unlikely that he would go to Michigan State, of all places. No disrespect intended, but some disrespect intended. But I just don't know if Urban Meyer has his fastball anymore because he's been out of the game for so long. I'm sure tactically he's still there, but it's not the same day and age of recruiting that it was when he was at his peak. And that is where I think he would not be interested in trying to out recruit Michigan and Ohio State for those types of players. But I could be wrong, and I don't know if you have any significant thoughts on it.
Yeah, Derek, I do have really one significant thought on this matter, and that's it's Harlan Barnett or Urban Meyer. What are we doing here? I'll take Urban Meyer. Who else, Derek? Who else are we going to get? It's Urban Meyer. I mean, we could dig up Coach O, maybe, Derek. We could dig up Coach O. But besides that,
Bob, maybe
who
Don
in the
Brown
bleak
maybe Don
are
Brown
we
is
going to hire?
maybe Don Brown is looking for a promotion from UMass.
Oh my gosh, Derek! Don't even get me started.
Bob, maybe
UMass.
Pat Narduzzi. Maybe Pat Narduzzi needs
Oh
to
my.
come home.
Oh my god. Well, I love Pat Narduzzi, but no, he's washed. It's over. I mean, that's a failure. Um,
I mean, there's
Urban
and
Meyer, Derek.
here's the thing, Bob, is if this would have happened last year before all of the realignment stuff, I could have seen MSU maybe being able to, snag Kalen DeBoer from Washington, maybe. Maybe they could have snagged the Washington State head coach. Maybe they still can snag the Washington State head coach since Washington State may be without a conference. But it feels like with the way realignment has worked, and more teams are not only moving up into Power 5 conferences, but going into more powerful Power 5 conferences than their own previous conference, it seems like the pool of bright young coaches just isn't what it used to be going back a couple years ago.
Derek, I say we give Pat Fitzgerald potentially the chance to make a
Now,
return.
I mean, MSU.
He's got a lawsuit, Derek. He's got a lawsuit pending against the university. It's
Here's
still murky waters there. It's murky waters.
here's the thing, Bob. Then this I think is in your benefit. MSU already can't go 365 days without a scandal. I mean, what
Might
shame
as well
is
get it out of the way early.
what
Get out of
harm?
the way early.
I mean, I don't disagree, Bob. What could Pat Fitzgerald do to harm the reputation of Michigan State any more than what they've already done to themselves in the past year? I mean, Bob, they put the Fuhrer on the scoreboard. Bob, Adolf Hitler's face was a prominent feature on the MSU scoreboard in the pregame because somebody didn't watch a 15-minute YouTube video to check that there wasn't anything, controversial. Just couldn't get out of their own way, Bob. Just couldn't get out of their own way. So why not bring in Pat Fitzgerald, the man who nearly led the Northwestern Wildcats to a Big Ten championship only a few short years ago?
I mean, I can't. I mean, I'm not. I'm not endorsing. I'm denouncing what Pat Fitzgerald did. But I'm trying to think of Derek. I'm trying to think of names
Lovey
that would.
Smith.
Oh my gosh, Derek. I mean, good lord, fresh out of getting canned from the Texans, Derek. The Texans. I
Cliff
mean,
Kingsbury, Bob. He's in the job market.
oh my gosh, we are. Uh, we'll
Maybe
be lucky. We'll be lucky if we can land freaking Coach Jim McElwain. That's all I have to
there's
say.
a name. There's a name. Coach Mac. There's a name. What about
Oh,
Alex Grinch, USC's defensive coordinator, Bob? Any interest?
no chance. USC's defense is a sieve, Derek.
Well, it's not that much different from what MSU's defense is, so I figured
Oh my
it'd be
gosh, Derek.
it'd be an easy transition for him.
Derek, besides thinking of coaches that have got like serious dirt on their name already that we could bring in. Clearly, MSU is going to go for somebody, barring maybe Urban Meyer, that's got like a clean reputation. I would think
You know,
somebody
you
that's
know, you know who I think would be really good for MSU, Bob? Manny Diaz, Penn State's current defensive coordinator, former head coach at the U.
Miami. Yeah.
Manny Diaz seems like the type of sleaze bag that
Oh my
MSU
gosh,
would be perfect
sleaze
for.
bag.
It
Sleaze
just seems like the
bag.
perfect fit, in my
Oh my
personal
god.
opinion.
Oh my gosh,
I mean,
Derek.
Bob, tell me. I mean, he looks like Pidgeotto out there with
I've
his
seen him, Derek.
hairstyle. I mean, come on, dude's out there looking like a Pokemon. It's
Derek,
perfect.
Can we get Coach Prime from Colorado, Derek?
I mean, you went to the Colorado well once before. Who's to say it can't happen again? Who's to
I
say?
mean, he's bringing his bags, and they're all Louis,
It
Derek.
could be, Bob. Uh, but yeah, one last thing, and then we can talk about Michigan if you'd like to, Bob. It feels like it'd be hard to go through this podcast without doing so, but we can. I'm more than capable. Uh, Bob, I don't think USC is going to survive in the Big Ten.
Why? Why is that, Derek?
Because I watched them play Utah. And you know what the Big Ten is full of? A bunch of Utahs, Bob. I mean, how is USC going to stroll into Kinnick Stadium at night and come out with a win? Not going to happen. Is USC going to stroll into Happy Valley for a whiteout at night and come out with a win? Absolutely not. Is USC even going to stroll into Rutgers and come out with a comfortable win? I don't think so. I don't think so, Bob. The Big Ten is full of Utah. I mean, Michigan would absolutely roll USC. There's no question. Um, I mean, heck, this year's MSU team could give USC a run for their money, in my own personal opinion. I mean, any team that plays remotely sound defensively gives USC problems, and I just don't think they're going to survive. They're not going to survive, and unless Lincoln Riley finds a way to, I mean, he might even leave, Bob. There's no small part of me that doesn't think that Lincoln Riley may follow Caleb Williams to the NFL if that's a possibility, or just leave USC altogether because they stink. They are probably one of the most overrated teams since Texas every single year. Um, it's just a shame my Wildcats couldn't pull off the victory when I dropped the nuclear whale cover play, which was nearly a straight up win. But I've watched a lot of Pac-12 games. I think Oregon's got a shot to run in the Big Ten. Washington certainly has a shot. We'll see what happens when Michael Penix leaves after the season, but USC just does not play a brand of football that inspires confidence that they can win in the Big Ten. And I don't know if you've watched enough of their games to have an opinion on that.
No, I haven't paid attention a whole lot to USC. I'm going to be honest, Derek, but I will say I do want to comment about another team that I have been paying attention to, and I think it's
Sure.
quite important that brought up in the podcast. Um, for loyal viewers at home, you may recall that prior to the season, we had a discussion with one Dennis J. Weaver. I don't know. Actually, I forget what his middle name is, but I'm just going to say J because it sounds good. Dennis J. Weaver. I think it is J, actually. But
Mm-hmm.
um, about how the Cincinnati Bearcats would fare in this new era of the Big 12, how the American Conference at large would fare in the matter of this new Big 12. I just thought, we're 4 games in the Big 12 schedule now. I just thought it would be relevant for me to bring this up. I'd like to point out that dead last in the entire Big 12, currently as it stands. Now, remember, folks, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Dennis is on record as of stating that the Cincinnati Bengals will be middle of the pack and bowl eligible, or not Bengals, Bearcats, not Bengals, will be middle of the pack and bowl eligible this season. In their first year in the Big 12. This is the same Cincinnati Bearcats that were, in the college football playoff not long ago. Currently 0-4 in Big 12 play with a overall record of 2-5, good for dead last in the Big 12. Now, you might remember one Nostradamus named Bobby Epler who said something along the lines of the American Conference stands no chance at all in the Big 12, especially in football as it stands. Now, I'd like to point your attention, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, to the standings of the Big 12 once again, so we
Bob,
can
Bob,
take a look at.
Bob, can you tell me what the combined record of the teams that moved from the American Conference into the Big 12 are?
Well, Derek, I would love to do so for you. A combined 1-11 so far for the former American Conference teams in the Big 12. Um, Good gravy. All of them below 500 as it currently stands on the season. UCF also 0-4, and Houston with 1 win in conference play. Dennis, I think there needs to be crow eaten. There needs to be acknowledgement that this is a disaster area. I don't know who could have possibly seen this coming because
Certainly not.
this is
Certainly not two individuals on this podcast.
I don't know who would have seen that. Um, you know, as it stands, but I digress. Dennis, give me a break. Now, hey, I remember another two smart individuals, that said that Colorado would be decent and be bowl eligible this season. Well, let's take a look at how they're doing. Well, they're currently 2 wins away from bowl eligibility with a over 500 record.
We were so
Unlike,
close, Bob. We were. I don't. I mean, feel free to continue, and then I'll give my thoughts on Colorado. Go ahead.
they've got a couple games coming up against teams that are right around them in the standings. They have to play Arizona still, which is they're They're
Guaranteed loss,
okay.
unfortunately. Guaranteed
They're
loss
oh,
for Colorado.
they're that should be a pretty good matchup.
We're going to beat them
Washington
by 20.
Washington State, that should be a good matchup. And some ranked teams, but you know what? We're right there. We're right there.
That
So at least on track. We only got to go 50% out of the last 4 games here. So we're looking much better at this point. We at least made it much farther in our prediction than Dennis did, I would say, on that front. Dennis, I'm going to need a written apology, and I think the fans deserve to see your face and have you eat crow without out of your predictions have been just going so far south. You've lost almost all credibility as the fans.
correct.
Just sorry to take away the time, Derek, but I just thought that small detail should be pointed out for our fans at home. Given that Dennis isn't here to gloss it over.
I think you're right, Bob, and I'm glad you brought it up. That collapse last week against Stanford really hurt us, Bob. For bowl eligibility purposes, we needed that one bad. We needed that one bad. Because, like I interjected while you were talking, Arizona's going to roll Colorado. They are going to roll them. There's no question in my mind. Which leaves a
Is that the
wash.
next big whale, Derek? Is that the next big whale?
I think it is. I think it is, especially if for some asinine reason Arizona were to be an underdog in that game. That would be give me the points and the money line because that is near guaranteed. Uh, but we're close, Bob. But they're gonna have to beat Washington State, which I feel like after having watched U of A blow Washington State out of the water, um, I feel like Colorado has a chance because they have a prolific offense, and I think that also serves them well for their matchup against UCLA because UCLA really doesn't have a truly electric offense. They've got a really stout defense, but that game feels to me like one where they can pull it off. If they do happen to be Arizona, that's good for our predictions, I suppose. But as someone who earlier this season also predicted Arizona would hit bowl eligibility, and they're riding the rails here pretty close. I'd rather be right for Arizona than for Colorado, but Dennis certainly made it seem like Colorado would win like 2 games this year, Bob. He seemed to just completely downplay the importance of Coach Prime bringing in some very talented players, not only with him from Jackson State, but also just in the portal in general. And if they don't hit bowl eligibility but finish at 5 wins, I think even though our prediction would be wrong, it'd still be a pretty successful prediction for us. Um, but yeah, it's pretty, who could have seen it coming that UC would be winless in conference play in the Big 12 to start the year? I mean, it's unprecedented, Bob. How could that have happened? How could that have happened with Emory Jones at quarterback?
I think you've got your answer.
Bob, we'll end with this story, and then we can get out. Do you have a right bench baller prepared, or neither do I? We can do winners and losers because there've been a lot of them, so I can certainly think of one off the top of my head. Actually, there's 2 more things I want to talk about. First one, we'll talk about Michigan, Bob. I think we've got to talk about sign stealing scandal.
I'll let you comment on this.
Sure. So obvious there's an inherent bias here in the way I am sort of approaching the situation. Here's what we know, Bob. We know that coaching staff being present at off-campus games of future opponents is illegal. We know that. We know that recording of a game by staff at a game between your school and an opponent from the stands is also illegal. We know that as well. We also know that it is illegal for an institution to hire third parties to scout for you. We know that a certain individual in the Michigan football staff, Connor Stalions, was purchasing tickets for other Big Ten teams and transferring those tickets to others who sometimes may have and other times weren't in some way, shape, or form associated with the Michigan football staff. But he was never there himself, at least from what we know so far. We also know that he had an Excel sheet that basically budgeted all of the expenses as to how this would go down. We know that other college football playoff teams had potentially been impacted. Um, Specifically, the Georgia Ohio State game seemed to be of certain importance. And we know that Connor Stalions has been at the hips of offensive and defensive coordinators during football games. We know that. Is there anything else of significance I'm missing that we know that is factual at this time? I'm trying to
Not
think.
that I can think of.
I'm trying to think of things that are truly factual and not conjecture that we know at this time. Oh, we know he made $55,000 and the budget was $15,000, something like that. Oh, that was the other thing. We also know that he's a former Marine and, dare I say, a Michigan super fan. I don't know if you saw, Bob, a nearly 600-page Michigan manifesto. He wrote a 600-page manifesto about what it would be to lead Michigan football. Um, we also know that he worked as a volunteer for 6 or 7 years, and he basically rented out his house as an Airbnb to afford to travel on his own dime to basically every Michigan game for 6 or 7 years. Um, and we know that Michigan's sign stealing prowess was well known throughout the rest of the Big Ten. So much so that Big Ten teams, including Ohio State, were contacting TCU before the college football playoff to tell them, hey, Michigan probably has your signs, you should consider changing them. Those are the things that we know is fact. What is yet to be seen, Bob, and what I have yet to get a solid answer on, is what specific rules Michigan has broken. What have they broken, Bob? Has Connor Stalions ever physically attended an off-campus game? Not that we're aware of. Is it illegal to record football games? If they were, there would be millions of fans banned nationwide from college football stadiums. And do we know for a fact that paying for someone's game ticket constitutes as an institution paying a third party for off-campus scouting? We do not know that for a fact. Could be, but we don't know for sure. We also have, for a fact, at this point, that Jim Harbaugh had zero knowledge of the whole ordeal. That is, at least up to this point, a fact. Here's the game I like to play, Bob. Here's the game I like to play. The fact of the matter is this. There could be penalties levied against Jim Harbaugh if what Connor Stalions was found to have been done to be against the rules. Jim Harbaugh could suffer some penalties because the NCAA sort of got a little stricter on head coaches having responsibility for the way their program is run. That does exist. What else exists is the Big Ten disciplining Michigan in some way for violating their sportsmanship policy if they so deemed fit. But until, Bob, something significant happens where somebody shows me what rule has been broken and the NCAA officially gives Michigan a notice of infractions, I choose to believe that there is nothing illegal that Michigan has done so far. I believe Jim Harbaugh, as he always has pushed the gray area to the absolute brink of black and white without crossing it. And it will remain to be seen what happens, but there are a lot of questions, more questions than there are answers at this point in time. But I think it is very telling that, as we were discussing before the pod, Bob, that no former disgruntled ex-coaches or players have absolutely blown the lid off this thing and said, oh yeah, everyone knew this was happening and what we were doing was certainly illegal. Haven't seen any of that, Bob. Haven't seen any of that. We also have yet to really receive any true evidence other than that would tie Michigan to specific illegal activities. We have some stadium footage of random dudes recording sidelines. We have some spreadsheets that were obtained by some random third party that nobody knows how they got there. But there's still nothing against the football program, no service of allegations. And I'm not sure, Bob, there ever will be. Not sure there ever will be. And my last point, and if you have some thoughts, I'd love to hear. My last point is this, Bob. Actually, I have two last points. One, there's not going to be an in-season ban for Michigan football. There's not going to be an in-season ban. There's not going to be any vacated wins. And the reason for that is because the NCAA in 2021, a committee tried to actually get rid of the off-campus scouting rule because it provided a minimal competitive advantage. Violations that constitute a gain in minimal competitive advantage, Bob, are level 3 violations, the least severe violations. So there's going to be no vacated wins. No vacated wins, no bowl bans. Could Harbaugh get suspended? Perhaps. Will he have, a level 1 or level 2 violation levied against him for failure to monitor his program properly? Perhaps. But I would argue that their suspending of Connor Stalions before being served with a notice of allegations from the NCAA would constitute cooperation for the investigation. And proper sort of measures to comply with NCAA guidelines. And the last point, Bob, there are 4 things that are never wrong. 3 if you're an atheist. Would you like to take a stab at what those 4 things are?
No.
And then I'll tell you. The good
Go ahead.
Lord is number 1. Facts are number 2. Numbers are number 3. And feelings, Bob. And you know what the feeling around the Michigan football program is going to be? Screw
What?
the Big Ten. Screw the NCAA. We are going to absolutely roll everyone in our path and win a national title. And so regardless of whether Ryan Day has done anything that Michigan fans have been trolling about Maybe it was Ryan Day that hired the third party investigators. Maybe it was Ryan Day that blew the whistle to the NCAA. Maybe it was Ryan Day who couldn't possibly consider the fact that he had been beaten with integrity. Surely Michigan had to have been cheating. Ryan Day. Regardless of whether Ryan Day was involved in this or not, or whether James Franklin truly believes that Michigan had every sign and did so illegally, it doesn't matter, Bob, because feelings are never wrong. And the feelings of Michigan players is we're going to roll you and you're going to take it. End of speech.
Wow, Derek. I'm not gonna lie. I don't have too much to add in there in that one. You kind of hit all the highlights. I honestly think that this is going to be ending up being more of a nothing burger than anything else.
No pun intended.
Um, but we'll see. It's either going to be a nothing burger or it's going to be way more than you think it is. That's all I've got to say.
I think I think you're right. There's no in between. It's either going to be the ban hammer or quite literally next to nothing. I think you're right. Bob, there's one last thing and then we can start to wrap it up. The Detroit Pistons, Bob, began the NBA season last night. A last second loss to the Miami Heat in the sense that the Pistons had a chance to tie and or win the game late. Cade Cunningham missed the game-winning three. Bob, the Pistons turned it over way too much. I mean, that was the short. That's basically the game right there. Is the Pistons, especially first half turnovers, but they got down pretty big in the second half and mounted a pretty valiant comeback. Cade Cunningham with an efficient 30 points, 9 assists. Osar Thompson, the rookie, Bob, 5 blocks and 7 boards for a wing. Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart both, I believe, posted 17-point double doubles. And you took the Eastern Conference champions to the brink. You didn't get the win. There are no moral victories in the NBA. But Monty Williams has the boys playing. They're fairly sound defensively. And if they can cut down the turnovers, they'll be, a legitimate playoff team, in my opinion. But do you have any certain outlooks on the Pistons? Do you have any thoughts on last night's game? And what is the win benchmark that would need to be reached for the season not to be considered a failure in your eyes?
Not to be considered a failure, 500 at least. Um, the thing about last night, Derek, is that we just had a number of players that were banking on to be something more than nothing, just shoot the ball horribly. Oscar Thompson, 1 for 7.
But he had
Jaden
5 blocks
Ivey.
and 7 boards, Bob. You
I know
can't.
they're big, but big. I'm talking offensive contributions. Uh, Oscar Thompson, 4 points, 1 for 7. Jaden Ivey, one
Rough.
for 1 for 7. Alex Burks, 2 for 8.
What about our best
Uh,
friend Killian Hayes, Bob?
Killian Hayes, 4 for 12. Not 0 for 6 for 3. Who the heck thought it was a good idea to let him take 6 threes? I have no idea.
Bob,
Um,
Isaiah Stewart hit a three.
2 for 3, Derek. 2 for 3. Get it straight. Um, yeah, I think this team will be significantly improved on the back of Cade Cunningham, but I'm not over the moon just yet. You're gonna need a year of gelling.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I truly think Cade Cunningham can carry us to the playoffs. Dude is. It's so good to see him fully healthy. He scored 30 points without getting a single free throw attempt, Bob. Not a single free throw attempt because he finishes through contact so well. Sort of plays around contact when he goes towards the rim. He doesn't really get, heavily contested to even force a foul. He just sort of makes it look easy and just always seems to come through. But yeah, no question, I think the Pistons will. I think you're right. 500 should be. I think it should be the floor. Uh, and certainly anything under 35 wins would be reason for panic. Because they're far too talented to be a 400 win percentage team. No question. No question. Did you get a chance to watch Victor Wembanyama, Bob?
I did not. I did
He is
not.
an athletic freak. Never seen anything like it before. I'm sure you saw the preseason clips of him
I
defending the
did. I
carpet.
did.
He was in foul trouble a lot, um, and the Mavs ended up winning. But dude is he'll clearly be able to play in the NBA. I don't think there's any question about it. Bob, we can get into winners and losers now. I know the battery is running low over there. The energy is low. I can see it. And that's okay because we're just glad you're here, Bob. Winners and losers, who's your winner of the week?
Derek, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna finish strong here for the people at home. I'm gonna go for the Las Vegas Aces as the winner of the week, Derek. Another WNBA championship secured for the Aces. I believe this is their second in a row. Becky Hammond. I mean,
Elite.
clear what?
Elite.
Clearly an underrated coach. You know, spending all the time in those shadows of Greg Popovich has truly found her niche in the WNBA. Probably at this rate will go down as one of the best coaches ever to coach in the WNBA, if not the best. Um, yeah, I mean, just
Don't sleep
tremendous
on
performance.
Bill Lambier, Bob. Don't sleep on Bill Lambier and the Detroit Shock. Don't sleep.
Don't sleep. But I mean, Tom Brady, co-owner, was there. I mean, good stuff. Good stuff all around from them. But I just thought I should point out. We don't talk WNBA much, but it was a good story there.
Yeah, my winner of the week is going to be Detroit uniforms for this season and this week. The Lions will be debuting the retro helmet look. As much as I'd love to see them wear the all blues with it, they'll be wearing the all grays with the original Lions logo. And then, Bob, I thought the Piston City Edition jerseys this year were finally good. We have gotten absolutely banged year after year. Last year it was those green ones. The year before that it was the black and gray Motor City ones. The Pistons have gotten banged for years when it comes to the City Edition jersey. This year, Bob, did you see it? The bad boys, skull and crossbones down the sides, the gray, orange, black, and white that sort of personified the bad boy Pistons. The Pistons logo has been sort of morphed with the bad boys logo on the shorts. Easily far and away a top 3 City Edition jersey for this year. I think the City Edition jerseys across the league were relatively awful, but I thought the Pistons for once, Bob, was finally good. I don't know what your thoughts were.
No, I like the nod, Derek. You could see what they were trying to go for, and I think you executed about as well as you could expect for Detroit.
Yeah, yeah, and would have been nice to see a little more color. Maybe feels like the Pistons get a lot of gray, but at least this time it actually sort of tied back to something significant with the franchise, and look forward to seeing how they end up looking on the court. Bob, your loser of the week.
I'm going to go with top teams in the NFC for loser of the week. Um, really not much explanation needed on this one. I mean, the 49ers getting schmucked and the Lions getting absolutely schmucked. You had the Eagles pull it out against the Dolphins, which you do have to acknowledge that, I suppose. But at the same time, I mean, we're looking at two teams that dropped a game that was really, really relatively uncompetitive between both of them for most of the games. So I'm going to go with top teams in the NFC, especially because of all the buzz that the NFC has been getting over the past week or two, nationally. Just the kind of the exciting teams seem to be there. I mean, everybody knows about the no the everybody knows about the Miamis and the Buffaloes and stuff like that of the AFC. But and the Chiefs obviously, but the NFC had got a lot of talk and they just kind of wet the bed last week.
Yeah. An easy loser of the week could be the state of Michigan, from the Michigan football scandal to Adolf Hitler to the Lions absolutely wetting the bed. That's certainly an easy one. Another easy one, certainly the city of Philadelphia for the bank being a fraud, Mickey Bank Park, as I like to call it. But I'm going to go into Dennis's world, the world of golf. Losers of the week, the world golf rankings. Bob, how are you going to have a world golf rankings and say what you will about live golf? How do you not give live golf players world ranking points for this upcoming season? You're going to tell me that Bryson DeChambeau is not a top 50 player in the world after winning, the season long live event. He was at the top of the standings and whatnot. Taylor Gooch is not top 50. Dustin Johnson, not top 75. You can go on and on and on, Bob. I don't particularly care for live. Still think it's good for competition. Still think it's good for golf. Um, but to not award World Golf points to players on the live tour, to me, makes the world rankings irrelevant and vindictive, petty, literally every negative, adjective you can think of, shameful, cowardice, all those things and more. I just thought that was a super loser move because it's really not that difficult to adjust a formula for the number of holes live golf players play, the cut, the course difficulty. I mean, you already have those sorts of formulas for the PGA Tour. You can very easily apply it to the live golf tour. They're lazy. They're just a bunch of losers. They're a bunch of losers, and would have loved to have heard Dennis's thoughts on that. I'm sure his ears are ringing and his spidey senses are tingling, but it doesn't matter because he's not here. Massive loser move from the World Golf Rankings to not include live golf players, in my opinion. What do you think on that, Bob? Just briefly.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's the world golf rankings. It has nothing to do with tour.
It's not the
It's the,
PGA Tour rankings, it's the World Golf Rankings. That's a great point, Bob. Appreciate that. Bob, we're going to end this at under an hour and a half. There's a lot to talk about since we weren't here for such a long time, but I think we did a good job of hitting all the important things. Can I get, very briefly, before you shout out the socials, a World Series prediction?
little bit more of my heart than my necessarily my mind. Snakes and seven, Derek.
My heart pick, Snakes in 6. My head pick, Rangers in 6. But we'll roll with the Snakes pick because we got to, and I really want to go to the trophy ceremony. Bob, take it away with the socials.
At Garb Time Takes on X, at GarbageTimeTakes on Instagram. You can find the link to our website in the description of this video below. Thank you for watching as always, and feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share with a friend. And if you see you hit Dennis up on social media, please tell him we miss him. Hope he's doing well and enjoy retirement.
Couldn't have said it better myself. As always, one final news update. We have agreed as a pod to release weekly. For a while, we tried really hard to make sure the three of us were here and then reschedule if it didn't work. The reschedulings never really worked out that much either. So from here on out, assuming all things go to plan, we'll be releasing a weekly pod, and whoever's here to do it will do it. Just to make sure we're always staying on track. It may not always be, Friday mornings when they get released. We still have to figure out what day works best for everyone. But fear not, we should be regularly producing a pod, save for holidays and other random things. Without further ado,
Hoorah, baby.
thanks so much for watching. We'll see you for next week's episode, and we appreciate all the support. In 3,
1,
peace.
peace.